They laughed when Emma stepped onto the range in rural Arizona, just a quiet mom with a borrowed rifle and no one to back her up. They called her sweetheart, snatched the gun from her hands, and streamed her humiliation online for a Saturday morning laugh. But they didn't know who she really was, or what she was about to do next. You'll want to hear this one. This story of injustice and redemption deserves to be heard. So, before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of quiet strength, raw courage, and the people who refuse to back down when it matters most. Now, let's rewind the tape and see how this explosive moment really began. From the second Emma pulled into the gravel parking lot at Dry Mesa Shooting Club, the air felt heavy, not because of the dry Arizona heat, but because of the way people stared, like she was a stranger who'd taken the wrong turn into their world. She wasn't dressed to impress. Just jeans, boots, and a faded flannel shirt, her hair tied back like any working mom trying to stay practical. No logos, no bravado, just a worn duffel bag with ear protection and a copy of her registration form tucked inside. When she walked toward the check-in table, the low buzz of conversation dulled. Heads turned, voices dropped. Emma didn't need to hear the words to know what they were thinking. What's she doing here? Is she somebody's wife? Probably signed up for the wrong thing. And honestly, she felt it too. That creeping voice of self-doubt. The kind that tells you maybe they're right. Maybe you don't belong. But she kept walking. Name? The man asked without looking up. Emma Carter. A beat passed. His eyes flicked up. Not curious, more amused. Competition division? He asked, double-checking the box. Emma nodded once. Yes, sir. He chuckled. All right then, he said, but his tone told the story. Like he already knew how this was going to end. Like she was signing up for her own humiliation. Emma took her lane assignment in silence. Behind her, someone whispered just loud enough. Ladies' Day isn't until Thursday. Laughter followed. She hadn't even touched a rifle yet, and already the walls were closing in. But Emma wasn't new to pressure, just new to hiding who she really was. What they didn't know was that this wasn't her first battlefield. And they were about to find out. Emma had barely made it to lane 9 when the first snicker echoed behind her. One guy nudged his friend and whispered just loud enough. Careful, she might shoot her own foot. She ignored it, tried to focus on the target. But the comments kept coming, layered, sarcastic, cruel. Then came the hand. One of the instructors, big guy in mirrored sunglasses, stepped behind her, reached over, and snatched the rifle out of her hands like she was a child playing dress-up. That's not how you hold a rifle, ma'am, he said, his voice intentionally loud. You're liable to put someone in the hospital like that. Laughter erupted around them. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Emma didn't speak, didn't move, but her face flushed with heat. She could feel every eye on her, judging, mocking, enjoying the show, but no one noticed her hand. It rested gently on the edge of the table, steady, unshaken. The light caught on something worn and metallic. A simple silver ring, nothing flashy, but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. A few feet away, an older man narrowed his eyes. The moment he saw the ring, his smirk disappeared. It wasn't just jewelry. That was a sniper's token. Military issue. Specific. Rare. The kind of thing you only earned by doing things most people couldn't imagine, let alone survive. Emma didn't acknowledge the recognition. She didn't need to. Because deep down, she wasn't here to prove herself to these men. She was here for something far more personal. She'd buried her past after her last tour. She'd left her rank, her records, and even her name behind. Became someone new, a school admin, a single mom, just Emma. But now they were poking at the one thing she'd worked so hard to protect, her dignity. She didn't flinch, she didn't lash out, but something shifted behind her eyes, something cold and exact, like a switch being flipped. Because you can only humiliate someone for so long, before they remind you who they really are. And if you've ever held your tongue when people laughed at you, if you've ever swallowed your truth just to avoid confrontation, you know what she was holding back. Drop a 1 in the comments if you're still listening with me. Because in the next moment, one bullet shut them all up. Emma didn't cry, not when they mocked her. Not when the instructor yanked the rifle from her grip in front of everyone. Not even when the crowd laughed and cameras started rolling. But later, during the lunch break, sitting on the back edge of the range alone with her coffee cooling beside her, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her son. Cody. Mom, are you okay? Some kids at school are sharing a video. It's from the range. They're being mean. That's when it hit. Not the embarrassment, not the anger, but the weight of knowing that her humiliation didn't end at the range. It had followed her home. It had reached her son. Emma stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She'd joined this competition for Cody. He'd begged her to stop hiding, to pick the rifle up again. You were born for it, Mom, he said one night as they unpacked boxes in their little apartment on the east side of town. Don't bury the cool part of who you are just because some people can't handle it. He didn't understand what it meant to be publicly laughed at, judged without mercy. He didn't know what it felt like to lose control of your dignity in front of strangers, and then have your child pay for it. Emma texted back simply, I'm okay, sweetheart, just focusing, I'll be home soon. But she wasn't okay. Because for the first time, this wasn't just about her. This wasn't just about being disrespected by a bunch of strangers with scoped rifles and ego problems. This was about her son watching his mother become a joke. Emma put the phone away slowly and looked back toward the firing lanes. Laughter still echoed from the picnic tables near the clubhouse. Someone shouted across the range about mimosas and late as day, and a few others howled in response. She clenched her jaw. Enough was enough. There are moments in life where you choose, hide again, or stand all the way up. And for Emma, that choice had just been made. Because when they laughed at her, they embarrassed a woman. But when they reached her son, they awakened a soldier. In the next part, we'll witness the moment everything changes. When Emma stops holding back. Stay with me, you don't want to miss this. Emma didn't go back to the picnic tables. She didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't demand respect. Instead, she walked quietly back to lane 9. She placed her hands on the rifle, this time. Not as a civilian, not as a mom, not as a woman surrounded by doubters. But as what she truly was. A soldier, a sniper, a protector. As she adjusted her stance, something clicked into place, not just on the weapon, but inside her. The world around her blurred. The mocking voices dulled, and her breathing slowed into a rhythm so familiar. It was muscle memory. Inhale, hold, exhale, inhale. Her fingers moved with quiet precision. This wasn't the awkward grip of a nervous newcomer. No. This was the grip of someone who had once lain prone in the dust of Fallujah. The weight of a decision balanced on the curve of a trigger. The sand, the silence, the countdown, it all came rushing back. Back then, she wasn't Emma, she was Sergeant Carter, 3rd Recon, Ghost Division, the woman behind the scope who earned the nickname, the Phantom of Fallujah. A name whispered with reverence in a dozen after-action reports. Though her face never made the news. She was the reason 19 Marines came home that week. 3 perfect shots. 1 unshakable calm under fire. But after the war, after the medals, after burying too many friends, she packed it all away. The uniform, the field journals, even the silver ring, until Cody found it one night in a kitchen drawer and asked, "What's this?" Now, here she was again, at the edge of something. Not a battlefield, but a reckoning. This wasn't combat. But it felt just as important. Emma took one final breath. And in that moment, she wasn't afraid. Not of them. Not of failure. Not of being seen. Because being underestimated had always been her camouflage. And now, she was done hiding. If you've ever had a version of yourself the world didn't see, a part of your past you buried just to survive. Drop a 2 in the comments if you're still listening with me. I want to know you're here. Because next, we'll watch what happens when a woman steps fully into her power, when the same people who mocked her stop laughing and start holding their breath. Coming up, 10 perfect shots, 1 unforgettable silence. Emma squared her shoulders. The sun beat down on the Arizona range, casting sharp shadows across the dusty lanes. People still chuckled by the clubhouse, unaware that everything was about to shift. She lifted the Remington to her shoulder, slow, deliberate, no wasted motion. Her breath slowed, her stance settled. It was no longer a borrowed weapon in the hands of an outsider. It was now an extension of someone who had once stared through a scope at targets who shot back. She lined up. First shot. Bullseye. Dead center. At first, no one noticed. Second shot. Another bullseye. Punching through the first. Heads began to turn. Third, fourth, fifth. All center mass. No adjustment. No hesitation. A ragged hole opened at the heart of the paper target. By the sixth shot, conversations stopped. By the seventh, shooters abandoned their own lanes. Drinks forgotten in their hands. By the eighth, even the judges had stopped pretending not to watch. A hush fell across Dry Mesa like a desert storm that hadn't yet broken. Ninth shot. Someone whispered, "Who the hell is she?" And then, the 10th. It split through the center of the cluster, slicing Emma's first bullet in half, a 1 in a million precision hit. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved, not a breath, not a blink. Emma slowly lowered the rifle. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stepped back and set the weapon down. Her heart beat steady, her breathing calm. She'd done this before, in places where the stakes were blood and bone. Not bruised egos, but the silence that followed? That was new. It wasn't discomfort, it was respect. The same men who had laughed now stared like they'd seen something sacred. Not a fluke, not beginner's luck, but mastery, control, lethal calm. Gary, the club president, stood by the leaderboard, mouth slightly open. The instructor who'd yanked the rifle from her earlier now stared at Emma's hands, more specifically. The silver ring glinting on her finger. Recognition began to spread, not from her name, but from what she'd just done. She hadn't said a word, but she'd just delivered the loudest statement on the range, without raising her voice. If you've ever dreamed of a moment where all the people who doubted you had to reconsider everything. This was that moment. Emma didn't need their permission. She'd already proven herself. But what no one expected was that this was only the beginning. Because in the next few minutes, one man would say her name out loud, and that name would change everything. Coming up next, "You're Sergeant Carter, aren't you?" Silence still hung over Dry Mesa like a heavy blanket. Emma stood quietly beside Lane 9, rifle resting on the bench. Hands relaxed. She didn't look around. She didn't have to. She could feel it. Every eye was on her. And then, from behind the judge's table, a voice cut through the stillness, low, stunned. "You're Carter, aren't you?" It was Mike Daniels, the instructor who had mocked her earlier that morning. The same man who ripped the rifle from her hands in front of a laughing crowd. Now, he wasn't laughing. His eyes weren't on her face, but on the ring. That small, worn silver band had done what no amount of arguing ever could. He stepped forward slowly, almost reverently. "Sergeant Emma Carter," he said again. "3rd Recon, Ghost Division. You're the Phantom of Fallujah." It wasn't a question anymore. Someone behind him gasped. Across the range, murmurs spread like fire licking dry brush. The name traveled lane to lane, whispered between competitors and staff like a secret someone suddenly remembered. The Phantom of Fallujah. A myth, a name passed around in military circles. The sniper who had saved an entire patrol with 3 shots in under 20 seconds. The one whose after-action report had been mostly redacted. The one no one could confirm, because no one ever had a face. Until now, Emma didn't nod. She didn't need to. Mike Daniels' expression said enough. His pride had melted into something more vulnerable, a mix of guilt, respect, and shame. Gary, the club president, approached next, face pale. He scanned the printed registration sheet in his hands like it might offer him an escape. "You could have told us," he muttered. Emma looked up at him, calm, steady, but sharp. "Should I have had to?" That question, simple, quiet, landed harder than any shot she fired that day. Because everyone knew the answer. No, she shouldn't have had to prove anything. She shouldn't have needed a title or war record to be treated with basic dignity. She'd earned her respect long before today. And now that the truth was out, the silence wasn't just awkward. It was reverent. They weren't laughing anymore. They were remembering every word they said, every look, every snide comment. And suddenly, they weren't so sure of themselves. But Emma? She wasn't interested in revenge. Because what she did next? It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about opening the door, for every kid who'd never be given the chance, unless someone like her held it open. Coming up next, Emma's quiet revolution, and the legacy she builds. Not for glory, but for the future. Emma didn't linger near the leaderboard. While the others whispered and traded looks of shock, she quietly packed her gear. The rifle, the ear protection, the lone water bottle now lukewarm in the sun. She'd come to the range alone. She would leave the same way, but something fundamental had shifted. People moved aside as she walked past. Not out of fear, out of respect. Chuck, the range manager, hustled over, suddenly polite to the point of awkwardness. "Staff Sergeant," he stammered. We'd be honored to offer you a lifetime membership. Free of charge, and if you're open to it, we have an instructor position." Emma held up a hand gently. "I'm not looking for a job," she said, "but I am looking for change." Chuck blinked. "Change?" She nodded toward a teenage girl across the range, someone's daughter. Maybe 13, watching with wide eyes from behind the spectator barrier. Her stance mirrored Emma's from earlier. Chin high, shoulders square, the beginnings of confidence. "I want to start a youth program," Emma said, "for kids who don't get taken seriously. Especially the ones no one invites into spaces like this." Chuck paused, then nodded. "You've got it," he said, no hesitation. 3 months later, the Dry Mesa Youth Marksmanship Program opened with 12 students, 6 boys, 6 girls, all between the ages of 12 and 17. Emma ran the sessions twice a week. Fundamentals, safety, breathwork, precision, not just how to shoot, but how to focus. How to trust yourself when no one else does. Cody, her son, helped out on Saturdays. His confidence had grown since that day at the range. He wasn't just proud of her. He was proud to be part of what she'd built. One afternoon, as Emma coached a new student through her first round of shots, a familiar voice called out from behind the line. It was Darren, one of the men who'd mocked her during the tournament. Only now, he wasn't laughing. He was watching his daughter, Jessica, hold the rifle steady with a look of pure determination. She used to think shooting was boring. Darren admitted, now she wants to join a college team someday. Emma smiled. Sometimes all it takes is seeing someone who looks like you doing it first. He nodded slowly, his pride shifting from himself to his daughter. A small but powerful change. As the Arizona sun dipped low behind the hills, Emma stood near Lane 9 once more, but this time, not as a competitor, as a mentor, a guide, not someone proving herself anymore, but someone making space for others to rise. Because true strength isn't in the medals. It's in what you do once they finally listen. And Emma? She used that moment to hold the door open. Thanks for listening. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it today. There's something powerful about being underestimated. It hurts, yes, but sometimes it sharpens you. It reminds you who you are when the world forgets. Emma walked into that shooting range as a stranger. A woman, a mom, a name without a title. And in return, she was mocked, humiliated, stripped of dignity in front of an entire room. But instead of breaking down, she broke through. Because real strength isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It waits, it listens, it observes. And then, when the moment calls, it answers. Emma didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. She didn't shame her critics, she outclassed them. And when she finally earned their attention, she used it to lift others. That's the lesson here. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't need applause to know your worth. You just need to stay true to yourself, especially when the world tells you to shrink. So if you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever been laughed at, doubted, told to stay in your lane, remember Emma, remember Lane 9, and more importantly, remember what happened when she finally stopped hiding. If this story meant something to you, take a second to like this video. It's a small click, but it tells us to keep sharing stories that matter. And hey, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you rise above it? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. We've got more stories coming, of quiet heroes, second chances, and the kind of strength that doesn't wear medals, but leaves a mark. Because sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room is the one they tried to silence. Thanks for watching. And remember, your worth doesn't depend on who sees it. It depends on you never forgetting it.